What is going on, Dodgers Nation? We're excited, we're happy, and we're also sad at the same time to be joined by our friend Mr. Mark Langill, who is kind enough to join us today. We're here a few days now since I mean, I guess we can't really call it untimely passing of Tom Charles Lasorda, but still, it's a sad time for a lot of Dodgers Nation. But it's also a happy time because you just get to hear so many great stories from fans, and who better than to give us some great stories than Mark? So, third time now today, I'm asking you this, Mark. How are you doing
I'm doing very well. Happy New Year. It's wonderful to be with both of you.
in this kind of weird way? But yeah, I'm guessing the news didn't quite come as too much of a surprise, but still, it's something where you can't help but be taken aback.
It still did come as a shock because Tommy, larger than life. There's no way you can get the phone call in the morning. He 2 years ago, it was close as far as we thought that might be it for Tommy, and he actually made a comeback, which was wonderful. And you always heard come back, come back, come back, and that was with Tommy. Tommy's in the hospital or Tommy's facing a challenge. Tommy could face any challenge, and so it was great news after the World Series when he's hospitalized, but he's making progress and he's out of intensive care and he's following, he's FaceTiming and people are sending him photos and he's communicating. And I guess just finally after 93 years, he got the most out of his life. I'll tell you that. It's an initial shock and you're like, wow,
Hmm.
that really happened. And then I think within an hour, you're smiling because not only you're thinking just how lucky you are to know such a man, and then you look back and you're thinking, wow, the first time I ever would have met Tommy Lasorda would have been in the left field pavilion getting his autograph on a Sunday. And at that point, you're thinking, who's Tommy Lasorda? It's just like if you're a kid, you're like Monty Bascall and Red Adams. Those are coaches under Walt Alston, but I really had no insight knowledge of Tommy Lasorda. And if you remember around that time, from from 1973 to 76, he's not doing the Tommy Lasorda act. He's the loyal third base coach.
Hmm.
So he's kind of like the bottled up Joey Amalfitano version of Tommy Lasorda. Finally, once that press conference, September 29th, 1976, Tommy throws down the gauntlet right away. I think the second or third line, somebody asked me how it feels replacing somebody who had been here 23 years, Walter Alston. I feel sorry for the guy who's going to replace me. And then if you think about it, in the next few days, the next few weeks, he had several announcements. The reign of the Cincinnati Reds was over, even though they had won the World Series in 75 and 76. The medical announcement from him that he bleeds Dodger blue, and that they were going to, that they were going to dominate. And I'm sure even Al Campanis is thinking, Tommy, hold the phone here. Let's. He didn't care. He had waited all his life for something like this, and he was just ready to go. But there's no way that Tommy started slowly as far as just
Hmm.
let's see what happens. Tommy actually starts with Frank Sinatra singing the national anthem on opening day. The only thing about Tommy starting slowly was the great story about Don Sutton and that first pitch to Gary Thomason, because there was always a question of whether or not that first pitch under the Tommy Lasorda reign was supposed to go to the Hall of Fame. And so Sutton throws the pitch. In his mind, maybe he thinks it's just, Thomason's going to take it and it's going to go to the Hall of Fame. Boom! Thomason hits it in the stands. The very first pitch of the Tom Lasorda administration is sailing to the outfield. And they were all able to have a good laugh about it because Sutton settled down, wins 5-1. Fred Clare, the marketing director at the time, said, Don, we could have mailed it to Cooperstown. You didn't have to let Thomason hit it to Cooperstown. But other than that, they start something like 17-6, and they get off to a big lead. And that's the year that they also have the 30 home run club. They've already got the infield in place, but Dusty Baker's hit just 4 home runs in 1976. And Lasorda's like, you're my guy. You're my guy. He's just playing regulars. He's not platooning. And so they ride to the pennant. And what everybody forgets, yes, they get to the World Series. And yes, Tommy would win 2 pennants in his first 2 years for the first time since Gabby Street of the 1930-31 St. Louis Cardinals. They lost that first playoff game in 1977 against the Phillies. Now it's best of 5 back then. So you got a lot of pressure. You've been talking a whole lot how great this team is, and they lose that first game. I believe it was 7-5. They wasted a grand slam, and I think Carlton had hit a homer. But game 2, before the game, Tommy knows his team might be tight. And who does he bring in for a motivational speaker? And this is the playoffs, right? This isn't spring training. Don Rickles, the comedian.
Mm-hmm.
And for 20 minutes, does his routine, rips the team up and down. I think even the line on Lasorda, during the offseason, you put a string on him and he's a balloon. He does his whole act. And the genius of Tommy was not that Don Rickles, hey, I know this famous person. I think that my team is tight and I'm going to do it my way. And if I need to bring in a comedian to relax. And the interesting thing about this, and people forget, 2 weeks earlier, Tommy had actually gotten in trouble with Rickles because he's got the big lead. He's on his way to the National League West title. He actually puts Don Rickles in a uniform in the dugout. Now, that's no big deal, but then go ahead, make a pitching change. Go out to the mound and talk to the pitcher. The pitcher is Elias Sosa, that apparently doesn't speak much English, but he says, hey, you're not the coach. And suddenly Rickles gets nervous. And Harry Wendelstedt, the umpire, comes out, and Rickles thinks, oh my God, it's over. And this is before TV and 38 cameras covering this. So Tommy's already going to get in trouble for this the next day with Mr. O'Malley. But in that moment, they're on the mound, and Harry Wendelstedt and Don Rickles, what are we going to do? Hey, Don, how you doing? Hey, we wanted to go to your show next week, but it's sold out. And Rickles is like, just get me out of this and you'll have a front row. And sure enough, the next week they're at the show and it's the front row. But that was the world of Tommy. Even though he got in trouble, for that pitching, he knew they were on the ropes. So let's play the Rickles card again, because if they lose, oh, Tommy's a clown. Tommy, this isn't serious and everything like that. He did what he had to do in the moment with Don Rickles.
Tommy's the start of Tommy's Hollywood Dodgers there in the 70s and 80s. And I mean, you look at by the end of his tenure managing, you see his office and it's just all these pictures. It looks like an Italian restaurant, because I'm pretty sure that's what he was going for in his office, right? That nice homey feel. And hey, look at all these people I know, but they know me.
Well, he took a page from the Leo DeRocher book, because in Brooklyn, Leo DeRocher did the exact same thing. And if you think about it, he later married actress Lorraine Day, but he was buddies with George Raft. He's buddies with Milton Berle. When they came out to the West Coast, he's the one that represents the Dodgers on shows like The Munsters or the Beverly Hillbillies, because Walter Alston didn't want to do the TV stuff. So DeRocher loved the Hollywood stuff as well. He'd hang out in Palm Springs during the off season. So Tommy decides, no, I'm not going to take the little trainer's room like Walter Alston had, because Alston, it had to be functional. He wasn't the type to have people come into his office and hang out. So Tommy takes over the trainer's room, and Tommy's a genius because Tommy has the food in the clubhouse. So if the player wants to come in and have food, he has to see the manager. Now here's the beauty. You can have all your Hollywood bobos and stars and everything like that in there too. And this is before the restrictions on in the clubhouse. So Tommy is making it like a mini Friars Club, with food. And that was, and yes, all of those pictures, yeah, look who I know, but it was the thing about the communication, and it was the intrigue as far as who's going to be in Tommy's office today. Steve Yeager did a interview for our PBS program, and he said, you just never knew who Tommy was going to have the next day at the ballpark. And that led, along with great players, I think that also kept ball players from being bored, because you come out to the ballpark, but you might run into a Hollywood star, you might run into a famous singer. And what always happens, the actor wants to be a ball player and the ball player wants to be an actor. So those two sides can never get enough of each other. It's, you hang out with the actor, you hang out with the ball player, because they're on the same level as far as success, but so they can appreciate one another's success in their respective industry.
Yeah, Mark, you talk about Tommy and It's funny because there's that famous quote where Tommy's talking about food and how he'll never throw away a morsel of food in his life. It's interesting how he created that kind of atmosphere around it. And I didn't even know that when you're talking about, in order to come in and get food, you have to go through the manager's office, that sort of thing. But I mean, what an atmosphere that guy created. And,
Yeah.
you talk about movie stars and Hollywood and all the things that go along with it. Really felt like he made the Dodgers a place that you wanted to be.
Absolutely, because if you think about it, before the marketing, Fred Clare, the marketing director, had thought, okay, think blue. Didn't say anything about Dodgers, think blue. And then Tommy took it a step further with the big blue Dodger in the sky. So Tommy took it a step further and just told everybody, that the Lord was a Dodger fan. That's okay, thanks, Tommy. And but with that winning, that was the key too, because he had winning ball clubs. But Tommy did so many things behind the scenes, and I had a chance years and years later, 2007, to spend time with him in spring training. His personal assistant had gone on personal leave. And so I took over and I told people it was the most remarkable 28 days, 14 hours, 37 seconds of my life, because it was Tommy 24/7. And I had such an appreciation. But behind the scenes, here's what he would do. He would write notes. He would make calls. He would do so many things with so many different people. And he's sowing the seeds, even as Dodger manager. He also analyzed his players. What would work as far as motivation? What wouldn't work? Who needed encouragement? Who needed a swift kick? Then he knew about the families, as far as the dynamics of the families and everything like that. And that was the important thing too, because he knew it was very important to take care of those families. And he knew with Mr. O'Malley, it was very important that when you look at Dodger Town, they'd have Christmas at Dodger Town and these other type of community things. Back in the day in the 70s, the father-son game, old timers day luncheons. So not only with the tradition of the past, Tommy wanted to have that community involvement. So he could put on so many different hats. He could put on his Hollywood hat. He could put on his kissing the baby cap. He could put on the encouraging the minor leaguer, the teaching cap. And then he could put on the Kingman cap if somebody asked for, his opinion on something that didn't go well.
He really had the range, and in hearing so many great stories over these last few days, I think one of my favorite that stood out, Andre Ethier was on with Sportsnet LA, and obviously Dre Day, Captain Clutch, not a born Dodger, but you wouldn't have been able to tell, especially now, this many years later. It's 15 years later from when he first made an appearance in Dodger Blue, and he was sharing the story about how I didn't know anybody. It was my first time there at Dodger Town. Dodger Town, obviously, very different animal, and I want to get your take on Dodger Town versus what we see now at Camelback. But Andre talking about, I'm sitting there, I don't know anybody, I'm alone, and Lasorda sees me and he says, "No, you're going to come to sit with me." And he said that was the beginning of the next few days of 3 to 4 hour, mini Dodger lessons. And that was at that time, that was, I guess, 2006. I mean, that's what Tommy kind of really back in with the organization again. We hate saying the name Frank McCourt around here, but obviously after Fox and everything and all that weird time and estrangement, McCourt was smart enough to bring him in, make Tommy that important again. You could see just how much Tommy loved it, literally until his dying days.
I have to tell you about Mr. McCourt, because as far as the Dodger history, very supportive of the past. He's the one that organized. Here's the funny thing about Mr. McCourt. 2005, it was early, maybe spring training, maybe it was January or February, and he had come from the holiday break, and he had a baseball in his hand, and he said, "Somebody gave me this Brooklyn Dodger baseball when I was back east, and I want you to look at it because they said it was from the 50s, could be 54, 55, 56." And I saw the name Frankkeller, and I said, "It's a 55 ball." And he kind of gave me this strange look. And, sadly, I get that strange look when I announce what that means as far as Frankkeller, because he was on the roster for the last, not only the last 6 weeks of the 55 season, but when Jackie Robinson steals home in game 1 of the 55 World Series at Yankee Stadium, there's a batter in the on deck circle, and I believe he's number 12, but everybody's like, "Who is that? Who is that?" And it was Frankkeller. And they asked him in spring the following year when he goes to the Cubs, was he safe or out? And he thought he was out, but it didn't matter because the umpire call stood. Sadly, that's all going through my head when Frank McCourt's holding the ball going, so what do you think? 54. So
Yeah.
I had to basically give him the Cliff Notes version and explain that he's 55. And he said, well, tell me about why is 55, is that significant? And what he meant was he had told me already, if you need to fly anywhere, go ahead. As far as he had given me that option. If you think, you do the history, if you think you need to go somewhere or meet somebody. So I give you that background. That's why he asked me that question. I said, well, 55, I said the two most important dates in Brooklyn Dodger history, Jackie Robinson's major league debut, April 15, 1947, and then October the 4th, 1955. Yankee Stadium, Brooklyn Dodgers win their first and only championship 2-0. And that's why 55 is so significant. So I tell him that story. Now, lo and behold, later it's announced there's going to be a 55 reunion at Dodger Stadium. All the living players are going to come back 2005, which includes Tommy, because Tommy was on that team.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. McCourt gets to the podium and he tells the story about why he did the story, or why he did the reunion. And you could have knocked me over with a feather, because he told the story about me and the baseball in the hallway, and he never told me that. He decided that that was important. And so I know not everything worked out in the administration, but I always want to say, in terms of the history, I still can remember when he found out Bill Sharman was going to be at the game. And Bill Sharman, the former Boston Celtic player and Laker coach, who had a cup of coffee with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he goes, hey, let's go down and meet him. And he was like a little kid. I said, you want to do it now? He goes, there's no time like the present. So I give you that story as far as Frank McCourt in history. For me, he couldn't have been more supportive.
I love that. Mark. Thank you. Appreciate that story. Look at you making things happen, Mark, making reunions happen, making things like that. That's awesome. What a great story to have in your back pocket just on a whim, just on a mention of Frank McCourt.
Let me tell you, I am just so lucky because, and you guys know my background. It's the dream job. I've had it since 94, and it's a very, very strange feeling when if somebody had said you could have another job, any other job in the world, and you got to question yourself and say, I don't think there is another one. I enjoy it so much. And it's not the success of the team as much as the people that I get to meet. And you guys are included, as far as it's a wonderful daily conversation, and the ups and downs. You guys remember the feeling in your stomach when they were down 3-1 against the Braves and everything looks bad. Mm-hmm. And, when they blow game 4 of the World Series, and suddenly it's like, instead of 3-1, it's 2-2.
Yeah.
And you guys are like, oh no,
here it goes again.
Oh, no. and sadly, I'm thinking of the 1941 World Series, game 4, when there was a drop third strike and the Yankee, I go, hey, this is the same situation. Everyone's like, we really don't need to know that right now.
Yeah. That's
Mark, the series is on the line, not now.
yeah. So this is just natural in terms of what happens. I just, I've heard Scully describe it as far as you're on the curb watching the parade. And for me, it's just been so fortunate. And the thing is, I don't play the game. Other, people like Friedman are putting the team together. People like Scully are calling the games. You guys are doing shows like this. I just enjoy the whole atmosphere, and I absolutely love it. When the 4th game of the season this year, right in the middle of the pandemic, I heard the first person complain about our offense, and I was like, yes, we're back.
We're back, baby.
We have our priorities in order.
That honestly, that might have been us. I'm not gonna lie. We have to be fickle at least every Monday, or else people get mad at us. They're like, oh, they're all homers and whatever. So
yeah.
You got to find something to complain about. But you look at now the weight that Tommy carried with him, both in size and in character.
Yeah.
And I say that because Tommy gave me weight loss lessons, and we flash forward a few years later, they didn't work, Tom. So I never got a chance to pick that bone with him, but I probably also didn't listen to what he said. But just how much he meant not only to the organization and kind of being that thread for more than, I guess about half of, I don't know, I'm not good at math on the spot, but for the entirety of the Dodgers organization, how much Tommy has been a part of it, and now that's gone, and just what that means for what he meant for baseball along the way. Just, you and I were talking earlier about you have 130,000 people posting pictures and all that. Just the amount of people that he touched, the way he touched the game of baseball all around, his ability to be that ambassador. Just what in your opinion now do you think we really are losing? Or I mean, it's Tommy. Are we losing anything?
I think we lose Tommy the person, but we're never going to lose Tommy the memory, and we're never going to lose Tommy the lessons. And I think this year, the important thing is to analyze why we love Tommy so much, because you can look at it from a business standpoint. How did he make the ball club? Well, but just imagine if it had just been about the Dodgers, and if it had just been about baseball, and he spent the rest of his life, the Dodgers this, the Dodgers that. What did Tommy do? Tommy took lessons from a baseball field, but they could apply it to everyday life. So he could go into a classroom and give some sort of analogy why you need to try your best, why to listen to your parents, loyalty and everything like that. So it wasn't, he took lessons from the baseball field, but it was about life in terms of accepting challenges. And you could just infer, here's a guy, the number 3 pitcher on a Norristown high school team that only had 2 pitchers. And he winds up in Cooperstown, and he would fit whatever message he had to whatever group he was with. And that was the key, because he wanted to not only uplift, but inspire people. He didn't have to, his record spoke for itself. He didn't have to say, I did this, I did that. He would get a big kick if some kid didn't have confidence, and Uncle Tommy suddenly said, you could do this. And maybe he heard 2 or 3 years later that he had listened to Uncle Tommy and was a success. And he could do that with the military. He could do that with any group. And one of my favorite moments was the Facts of Life speech that Tommy gave to my nephew when he was 7 years old. And this is about 2006. And my nephew walks into Tommy's office, and I had no idea that he was going to give him the Facts of Life speech. And he did. And do you want to know what the Facts of Life speech was?
Oh, I want to know it so bad.
He looked at my nephew and he said, Michael, you look like a fine young man. I want you to always remember one thing, dramatic pause, always stand in the middle of the photo so they can't crop you out. My nephew gives me this blank look, and I said, I'll tell you later.
Yeah.
Now think about this. That story was the lead to the obit that I wrote on the Dodger Insider blog. And it had nothing to do with my nephew. It had everything to do with the message, because think about Tommy his whole life. He wanted to be in the picture. He's the youngest of 5 brothers. His high school coach doesn't believe in him. Everybody else, he's got to fight for everything. In the minor leagues, you had mentioned Andre Ethier. When he comes to that Brooklyn Dodger organization, 1948, that's the height of the minor league organization with over 600 prospects. Wow. He said that he would sit in that very same dining room with guys like Ralph Branca and Clem Labine, and not because they invited him, but because there was no caste system in terms of pecking order where you sit. You could have a Hall of Famer sitting next to somebody in Class D ball. So Tommy would say he'd ask, a player for a shirt or a glove or something, because, who knows what he had. And then he'd write home and say that, he had dinner with Ralph Branca, he had dinner with Clem Labine. And of course, the rest of the story was they didn't know they were having dinner with him.
Yeah.
But, Tommy never forgot. Tommy never forgot where he came from. And I got to tell you, doing that behind the scenes stuff as his assistant for the 28 days, so much stuff I saw behind the scenes as far as, well, let's give him a call. He would just randomly go through mail. It didn't matter if he didn't know the person. So-and-so's sick. Hi, this is Tommy. Hope you're, he truly enjoyed making other people happy. And those people that wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't have anything to do with Tommy as far as him getting something out of it or relating to his job, just doing something nice for somebody else. He genuinely liked doing that.
Yeah, Clint and I have, we've been fortunate to have a couple run-ins with Tommy, either at Camelback Ranch or in person with Clint. But there was one instance, it was my first spring training as a credentialed media member, and We ran into Tommy a few times, and it was
Yeah.
just great to see. I didn't get to meet him till much later in his life, but even at that age, still as sharp as ever, still as funny as I've ever seen any
Yep.
clip of him or anything like that, and just welcoming beyond anything. At the time, no one knew who I was when I was there at Camelback Ranch. I was just
I
somebody
didn't.
that was there with a camera and a media pass on my shirt. But Tommy would always make sure to come through, say hello to everybody, and crack a joke on his way through to the locker room. And there really was just no one like him.
I like the quote from Clayton Kershaw that said, "We had heard every story, we knew everything in
Yes.
advance, and yet he could still command the room every time he came in." And I thought that was a wonderful tribute. And my mind wanders to various things. My family was at a game once, and he came up to my grandmother and said, "I'm glad to hear you're feeling better." And he keeps walking down to the press box, and my grandmother just had stars in her eyes. And it was like, wow, how did Tommy know I was recently sick? And of course, if you're over 80 years old, chances are you were recently sick. So
Yeah.
Tommy was taking a great educated guess. But even doing speeches, and he'd see, I see somebody in the clergy, and he'd pause what he's doing so he could do his routine. He said, Father, I always had a question. Why didn't the Corinthians write back? And this is in the middle of a speech, and suddenly I heard he was master of ceremonies once, where he said, "Good evening, I'm Tommy Lasorda. I'll be your master of ceremonies. I'm not here to bore you, but I'll introduce to you those who will." Right off the bat, he kills the whole dais.
That's a chef's kiss right there. That is just a vintage Lasorda, even till like deep in, or not deep, into his 90s, he's still giving you these stories. He's still as sharp as ever with the wit, even as the body failed him. The mind was always there, and yeah, like Brooke was talking about, a simple little story, and it's nothing to Tommy, but it means something to somebody else. And like you said, Mark, he just lived to make people feel happier, and make people just feel important in some way. And he did a hell of a job doing that for 93 years.
He did, and we had a fun something that we could finally do for him. When I was his assistant, he would always bring in photos and stuff. And one time he brought in a canister, and it had some film in it. And I took it to get developed. And I don't think Tommy ever took it home. So when Tommy got to the hospital, I thought, I'm going to call his daughter and see if she's ever seen this film, because it had come from the house. And what are the odds that Tommy in the hospital is going to be able to see the home? He wanted to be home for Christmas, and he was still in the hospital. Well, technically, through a miracle, he was home for Christmas, because the film was 1956 home movies at Christmas. And it's 30-year-old Tom Lasorda, hugging his maybe 3 or 4-year-old daughter, Laura. And just to be able to have him see that in a hospital bed, just to be able to, how would you even think that you would see that all those years later? It's funny because very rarely did you think you could maybe do something for him. And there were a couple things that I was able to do. He has the famous story about when he is a kid, and he's standing outside a ballpark, and I believe it's the New York Giants in town. And a kid, he asked for somebody's autograph, and the kid got out of the way, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So Tommy, of course, there's even Tommy still gave him the look at that age, as far as, okay, he found out who he was, Buster Maynard. And Buster, not a famous name, but he blew Tommy off that day. You're not, no autograph for you. So what are the odds? Just a few years later, Tommy's a little older, and he's starting his minor league career, and he's pitching. And he hears on the loudspeaker, now batting, Buster Maynard. And Tommy said, of course, the horns came out.
Yeah.
And so, of course, where the first pitch, the second pitch, and the third pitch are going.
Yeah.
And after Buster Maynard got off the floor for the third time, he said, "What have I ever done to you? Do I even know you?" And Lasorda on the mound said, "That's for not signing my book when I was a kid. I wanted your autograph." And Buster's like, "Who is this?" It was crazy. So let's flash forward maybe to about 2015. It's the age of eBay. I found something. And so at the holiday time, I gave Tommy a 3x5 card that had been signed, and it was I put it in a plexiglass frame. He sort of looked at it, and then he sort of made out the name. He goes, "Is this who I think it is?" I go, "Yeah, you finally got your Buster Maynard autograph."
Oh my gosh, that is perfect.
And then the better one, also eBay, somebody has a listing for Tom Lasorda's high school yearbook, not the personal one, but his class, from somebody famous. So of course, whatever it costs, I got to get this thing. And it was amazing because when I got it, I turned to the sports, and there is Tommy in the front row with this wavy Harpo Marx type hair, and the sweater, and it's you got the look. He still looks like Tommy, but this is Tommy in high school. Even though he looked like he'd been through 300 fights, he still technically is a high school kid, but he definitely, had that edge look to him.
Yeah.
So I take it to the office, and I give it to him, and I believe, I don't know if I gave him the yearbook, because the funny thing was his picture was not in the yearbook. I believe he had left school before the graduation, and I never got the story of if this was the yearbook the next year, or if Tommy was, missed the class or something for the photo. So he sees this photo. Now this is going to be unbelievable that I tell you this, but I show him the photo. He's quiet for 30 seconds. Nothing comes out of his mouth. So at that point, I know he's not seen this. But at that point, I'm distracted going, I can't believe he's not saying anything for this long.
You found it. That might be your career highlight, finding a way to take words out of Tom Lasorda's mouth,
Well,
or at least shut him up.
I was shocked. And so finally, he breaks the silence. Not thank you for the yearbook. Not where did you get this? Oh my gosh, I never thought I would see this. He takes the finger and he points it at the man wearing a suit in the team photo and says, "That's the guy that didn't play me."
That's what stood out to him from that. That's what he remembers from that.
Didn't name him by name. That's the guy that didn't play me.
Hey, those are the important things. Don't slight Tommy. You know what? He may not have had all the talent in the world, but you couldn't have told him that.
Well, it had a happier story because 1954, he's at Ebbets Field and he's in the major leagues. And the man, the coach is at the Tommy, he's at the game, and Tommy sees it's his high school coach. And you'd think there's some tearful reunion or a hug. Tommy just stood there, pointed to the chest that said Dodgers, and went into the dugout. That was it for the reunion.
I think he won that round.
Yeah. That's got to be something to have, so many people kind of overlook you in some way, and just to end up where you're at the end of it all, man. It's 93. We're saying there's that you're still shocked that he's gone, but nobody could have lived a fuller life than Tommy Lasorda. And I want anybody to tell me otherwise.
You're exactly right. And he always used motivation, people not believing in him, or if he perceived a slight. He didn't think that Alston liked him. And, first of all, Alston didn't pitch him that much. And Tommy got mad at Alston in 54. And whether or not this is true, Don Zimmer told Tommy, "You're not going to like it. Tell me, you're not going to like it." And he said, "The only reason you were called up to be a cheerleader." Now, whether or not Zimmer was pulling Lasorda's leg or he actually heard it, Lasorda ran into Alston's office and said, "I didn't come here to be a cheerleader." And he had pitched for him in Montreal, but this is different. This is the majors. Alston takes over in 54. So, he's got to go with the Erskines, the Preacher Rose, the people that are more consistent. Tommy tells the story that he was supposed to get a better audition at the end of the 54 season. They were going to pitch a guy named Carl Spooner, and if Spooner got in trouble in the first inning, that Tommy was supposed to be the next one in. Well, Spooner gets in trouble, but he gets out of it. Spooner ends up striking out 15, and
Wow.
pitching a shutout, and then he pitched another shutout the next game. But it's like Tommy was that close, and then Tommy ends up barely pitching in 55. And when Tommy gets his first start, there was a commentator that said, "Well, he gave up some wild pitches, this and that." The real story was Tommy's covering home plate as the Cardinals are rallying against him. Wally Moon slides into home plate and slices that knee, and you can see, all the guts and everything like that. And of course, Tommy still wants to come in because stay in the game because it's taken him so long. And they're like, you got to get to the hospital and everything. And then the funny part was about maybe 2017, 2018, the two people that threw out the ceremonial first pitch were Wally Moon and Tom Lasorda. And I knew the story. So the joke was, hey, Wally, recreate the slide,
I'm sure Tommy loved that one.
You know what? Tommy had a wonderful sense of humor. And if it was a good line, he didn't mind. And the best example I have of that
Hmm.
was when Tommy's portrait was going to be hung in the National Gallery. And his wife said, they must have a hole in a wall somewhere that they want to cover. And he thought that was a great line.
Can confirm that is a very good line.
That was very good.
But now, I wanted to double back to something because you're the guy I wanted to get thoughts on with this because, I think literally every morsel of Dodger history, and I think you could project well enough kind of the way we're going. Ethier, in part of his conversation with Sportsnet, and he's sharing his first story of Tommy and all that, but he kind of sensed this realization from him because now here we are, we're in 2021. Spring training is going to look a lot different, but even last year, you're not seeing Maury Wills there. We just lost Nuke the season before. Now Tommy, you're getting these threads from the Brooklyn days, and you're getting this long, the people that know this history of the Brooklyn Dodgers, of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And where do you are we going to lose that? Is this Dodgers team, is this kind of just the way baseball is going to end up, where it's just this cold corporate world, and we don't need to know about the past? Or do you have some hope that enough of these guys will still continue telling some of those Tommy stories and the legacies and passing them on?
I always have hope because when you think about it, when I was a kid, the quote old timers were the really old Brooklyn Dodgers.
Yeah.
As far as in my, in the 70s, such people as Casey Stengel, he had passed away. And so some great players, Jackie Robinson, even though he was only 53, he passes away. Gil Hodges passes away. I think the most important thing, and you look at the Lakers as far as the Minneapolis Lakers, whether it's the Rams, the Cleveland Rams, and everything like that, anybody that's in charge of any sports team, they're the ones that are in charge of their history. And that's the most important thing because that's the thing that can't change, but that's the thing that people really have their memories. Yes, it was exciting in 2020 for the Dodgers to win the World Series. But for me, I still have that in the gut feeling when I see highlights from the 74 World Series, because 4 out of the 5 games were decided by scores of 3-2. I still think about Reggie Jackson in the 77 World Series, because even though the Dodgers lost, and Kirk Gibson was very theatrical as far as that home run, you've got to give it to Reggie as far as 3 home runs on 3 swings, and that third one and the little stutter step around the base, and he's doing that for NBC and Howard Cosell, for ABC and Howard Cosell, what this man has been through, and everything comes together. Every generation has to be able to take care of their history, whether it's the New York Jets and Joe Namath, you name any franchise. It's very important for kids growing up, because when I learned about the Dodgers, about the initial stages of the LA Dodgers, and then this thing called the Brooklyn Dodgers. But I think that's the most important thing in the challenge, because if you're like me and you grew up at the stadium, you'll never forget that feeling of being at the ballpark on a Sunday and getting the autographs and hearing Helen Dell with the organ, and the chance to get autographs and everything like that. Things evolve as far as maybe kids aren't collecting trading cards now, but there could be selfies. It's what you make of it. And so I don't think you can just sort of stay there and say, no, there's no way we can do this. There's no way we can do that. It used to be this. It used to be that. Andre Ethier is a great example because Andre Ethier might be considered, a modern day player. But then again, Andre Ethier still has a story. Andre Ethier, it's still cool to hear about his Arizona State team losing to Ohio State in the Rose Bowl because his brother-in-law happens to be the quarterback from Ohio State that did the upset. And so if you know those behind the scenes stories, people are people, and it's what you make of it. If you go to a ball game, you're going to hang out with your friends, you're just going to stare at your phone the whole time. I think that's really the one of the most amazing things I ever heard in gosh, it's like 26 years now with the Dodgers. I heard a high school girl, maybe she was in middle school, but she said, I forgot my phone at the game. I left it in my car, or I left it in the car. But you know what? I still had a good time. And of course, I felt like, they were ready to put the dinosaur exhibit sign in front of me because I just couldn't fathom that. But the key is to find out whatever people are interested in and react to that. You just can't do the same old, same old. I'm sure it's like you guys with your show. What's popular? Get the feedback. Look at all the things at the stadium as far as the exhibits, the food. You want people to be there. You don't necessarily care why they're there because it's the passion. If people are upset because you've lost 10 in a row, that's absolutely wonderful because indifference is the enemy. You want them to care. You want the Dodgers to be part of a daily conversation. And anybody with a sports franchise has that opportunity to celebrate the past because I can still close my eyes and smile with Jimmy Wynn. I can still see Joe Ferguson fling that helmet after the Friday night homer to lead to a 3-game sweep in 1980. I still get chills with Fernando Mania, Gibson limping around the bases, or even John Shelby getting that walk against Dwight Gooden in the NLCS in '88 when he had a 0-2 count and Gooden had retired like 19 batters in a row. All that stuff, it's just what you make of it.
Yeah.
Mark, with that in mind, I kind of wanted to ask you, does that mean that you're okay with the renovations that happened at Dodger Stadium?
You know what? Janet Marie Smith is like the ballpark whisperer.
Yep.
And I am just the biggest fan of hers, and I am so appreciative. And congratulations are in order for her executive vice president status because it's like she takes the pixie dust wherever she goes. And here's the genius of Janet Marie Smith. She doesn't come with preconceived ideas as far as it's got to be this way and that way. She parachutes into a city and investigates the traditions, the history, the lore, and everything like that. And that's the important thing. Not, well, this is the way we did it in Boston. This is the way we did it at the Rose Bowl. This is the way we did it in Atlanta. That doesn't work. And so that's the most important thing. How cool that those directional signs that you see at the stadium, you saw people leaving the flowers for Tommy in front of the Vin Scully sign. That hexagon type shape originally was in Walter O'Malley's files in the early 1960s, and they didn't get around to making it. And Peter O'Malley made his files available to Janet Marie. And that's really the great thing. She has to mix the modern amenities as far as the food, the Wi-Fi, and everything like that. But she also knows people are going to get nostalgic for that Vic Davalillo 1930 number 33 retro jersey, from when he dropped the bunt against the Phillies in the league championship series, shocking everybody and starting a rally with the Moda double and the Lopes ricochet hit and the Russell hit up the middle off of Garber, and suddenly they're the pennant winners. Those types of things too. If it's just shiny, if it's just this corporate looking bank, you got to have the nooks and crannies. You've got to have the random Tom Niedenfuhr or Davey Lopes, or just pick whatever era Jeff Torborg photo, because somebody's going to look at that and go, yeah, I remember that. That was that's really cool.
Yeah, we
Mark,
can't.
I mean,
really good. I can't. I just got to say, I can't wait to get out to the stadium and really see in earnest. Last time we were out there, everything beyond the pavilion was a dug down dirt hole. So, and they were introducing Mookie Betts and David Price. So I really want to see the rest. I really want to see the blue heaven on earth sign that's an important part for us.
I had a chance to go out there this summer because I did a tour on camera. I haven't been in the physical office since mid-March, but as far as outside to do the TV stuff, and one of them was a tour around the ballpark, and that outfield experience is just amazing, just to see what they did. And it's a perfect, I guess I'm the perfect person to compare, because having grown up in the left field pavilion, it sort of feels the same and sort of looks the same, but it's totally different. But structurally, you still have the feeling you're in the same place. So she still kept the structure, but added the amenity. And it's very, very exciting to see.
Looks great in pictures. I mean, just from what we've been able to see, the flyovers, things like that, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait till we actually get to go out and do that and see real people and be out in the stands. Mark, as always, time has flown by talking to you. I think if it were up to me, I'd probably talk to you for hours on end, because I'm a Dodger nerd. I'm a history nerd. I'm a baseball nerd. I love hearing these type of things. I'm sure everybody loves hearing these type of things. But real quick, before we let you go, what are you most looking forward to in the 2021 season?
I think just what you said, being out at the ballpark, because I'm 55 years old and my first game was at age 7. And obviously it's something that I took for granted, being to be at the ball game. There were so many things in life I took for granted. And one of those things, as far as not only being at the stadium, but the feeling to be with other fans. And so I appreciate the Zoom technology, and I appreciate the fact that I can tell these stories, and it feels good to tell these stories, because it's not to my family, because they say, who cares and what's for dinner? So thank you for giving me an outlet. But I just have so much fun at the ballpark, being at the atmosphere. And I'll tell you, my favorite moment at the ballpark, 10 minutes before the game starts, because when you walk that corridor, I love looking at people's faces, and just 99 out of 100 people there, they have that anticipation look, or they're glad that they're there. And where else are you, where it's how cool, I'm here. That's the part I love the most, the anticipation, no matter who you're rooting for. Hey, I'm at a ball game. How cool is this?
Man, I missed that.
Absolutely.
I missed
Absolutely.
that. Well, Mark, again, we appreciate your time. Like Brooke said, we could talk for hours about this. Hopefully one day we get to no cameras, no other BS, just shooting the soup and enjoying Dodger baseball and Dodger fandom and everything that goes along with it. But again, we appreciate your time, and we hope to see you at the ballpark real soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Happy New Year. And I'll do a quick plug for fans who haven't seen. This is our Dodger book, All for One, that we put together. That's with Hershiser and Davis, and Clayton Kershaw, Hershiser, and Dave Roberts. And so that was a fun project to put together. And we just look forward to whatever happens in 2021. We know it's going to be a celebration of both the 2020 World Series, but also the life of you, as we've discussed, of Thomas Charles Lasorda.